How's it going, everybody? In this video, I'm going to be going over 12 strategies that you can use to keep a conversation going. So, if keeping a conversation going doesn't come naturally to you, as it did not come naturally to me for many, many years, there are a number of different things that you can do to sort of keep a conversation going more naturally in a way that feels more fluid, right? Because one of the biggest problems that I see or hear about, or the reason, I did this video is because I got a question on how to keep a conversation going. It's very easy if you don't have these strategies at your disposal to end up in conversations that feel forced or awkward or way too far on the small talk end of the spectrum, right? Where it's like, how's the weather? Oh, it's raining. Oh, wow. I didn't think we'd have rain, right? And it doesn't create the kind of conversation that leads to something engaging or developing relationships. So we'll go over a number of different ways that you can sort of keep the conversation alive in a way that feels more authentic and natural and nicer. So the first strategy we're going to cover is getting into the right mindset. And getting into the right mindset means basically coming from a place that you're able to have a good conversation, right? So one piece of that is being curious about other people, right? If you come into a conversation curious about another person, and we're going to mostly talk about conversations with new people or people that you don't know especially well, because that's going to be the time when conversations tend to be a little more awkward. Now, when you come into this conversation, if you come in curious about the other person, then that will more naturally lead you to sort of asking questions and trying to learn about the person, which is a very easy way to keep a conversation going. Another piece of that, however, getting in the right mindset, is not feeling like you need to show off or prove something, right? If you come in more on this curiosity side of things, you're much more likely to engage with the person in a way that will allow the conversation to flow, as opposed to if you come into a new conversation with this idea of, I need to present myself in a certain light, I need to appear to be a certain person, you're going to have a lot more pressure in your mind. Whereas, following your curiosity is going to be a lot more natural, and it's going to lead you into deeper and longer discussions. Now, the second strategy we're going to talk about here is to actually listen, right? Active listening, I'm sure you've heard it a million times, but it's critically important that you hear what the other person is saying so that you can build on top of it. The most awkward conversations, or ones that stop quickly or just end in weird places, are when two people are not really talking to each other. And you've probably heard a conversation like this before, where one person will say like, oh, I just got a promotion, and the other person will say, oh, I got a promotion 3 years ago, but I didn't like it because I didn't want to work in that industry. And it's like, there's some minor level of overlap, but there's not really that connection. So the biggest thing that you can do that is very common is to stop sort of pre-planning what it is you're going to say in your head, right? And this is easier said than done, but often in conversations, people will have something that they latch onto and they stop listening and they think, okay, this is the thing I'm going to respond with. However, by the time the other person finishes, they may or may not even be talking in that realm anymore. So you need to pay attention so that the next thing you say actually connects to what they've said. This sort of habit of wanting to make sure that you get to say the next thing that you had in mind is really detrimental to the flow of conversations much of the time, because you often end up just with this disjointed feeling between the two of you, and then before long, both people are sort of feeling unheard, if both people are doing this. The third thing you can do to keep a conversation going is ask open-ended questions, right? The more space you give someone to sort of answer something, talk about something, explain something, the more likely it is that you're going to see other points to sort of deepen that conversation, or you're going to be able to find different things that you're mutually interested in, or some sort of connection that you're able to grow and build this conversation off of. One of the things that you can do if you find these sort of open-ended questions hard is to preemptively get sort of a list of go-tos, right? Like, get some questions that feel nice and natural to you and use those whenever you're sort of trying to learn about or meet new people. So one of the things that I personally like to ask and find interesting is if a person had unlimited money and no constraints, what would they be doing? What would they be working on, right? And it's interesting to me to see if that kind of lines up with what it is that they are doing. And a lot of times you can learn a lot about someone by what they want to do more than what they are actually doing. So that's just one that happens to work for me. But getting your own set of questions, your own arsenal of tools that you can kind of use that are open-ended, right, that allow people to speak about things at length, the easier it is going to be to keep the conversation going. And in my example, right, when people start talking about the stuff that they really want to do or care about, that often opens up kind of a longer conversation as they sort of explain why that they want to do the thing that they've talked about, and you get more understanding of the person. That takes us to number 4, which is to go a layer deeper, right? One of the things that I hear a lot or very often is that people really hate small talk, right? You don't want to talk about just the weather because it's not engaging to either person, right? Unless someone's a meteorologist or they really care about the weather for some reason. Typically, it's sort of this surface level exchange of information that doesn't really touch on anything that either person cares about. So there are things that you can do to sort of deepen the conversation as it goes on, right? By asking more questions around sort of some of the roots of the answers. So you can do things like, if you ask someone what they do for a living and they say they're a banker or something, you can ask them how they got into it, right? Which is an open-ended question. It allows them some space to speak about sort of their path at length, and then you can get more of an understanding and find more topics to spin off into. On that note, you can sort of explore differences, right? If someone is interested in something because it's a safe job and you are more interested in things that have more risk and reward or something like that, then you can sort of play into and explore those differences. In the same way, if you find something similar, you can build on that camaraderie and sort of interject some of your own experiences and whatnot, in addition to asking questions, and find ways to get to a deeper level of conversation. Now that takes us to number 5, which is to validate understanding even if you don't agree with the particular thing that has been said. It's very important in conversation that both people feel heard, right, for the conversation to go well. And you can validate that you've heard something without agreeing with it, if you don't happen to agree with it. So, for example, if someone says something like, oh, I took this, banking job because you want your job to be safe and secure, and you don't agree with that, right? You think, oh, I want to take risks in my job, in my career, and whatever else. So you can say something like, oh, so you value a lot of stability in your job. I totally get that, and that's interesting, but I actually care more about taking risks and finding ways to move through my career. I'm not as worried about if I lose the job or whatever else, right? So by sort of structuring your response in that way, you say like, I've heard what you said. I acknowledge that and validate it as a valid position, but I don't agree. Here's what I care about, or here's what I think, or whatever else. By sort of validating the understanding first, instead of just saying like, are you serious? You need a stable job? Like, no, your career is for taking risks and whatnot. You make the conversation more likely to sort of diverge. And by that I mean, the more that you can validate the other person, the better they're going to feel and the more they're going to want to talk, whether or not they agree with you, right? Because they're feeling heard and they're feeling valued in the sense that you at least acknowledge them as a person. This is something that I see fairly often that people do wrong, is they sort of don't validate understanding as they're trying to go deeper and explore differences and whatnot. And what happens there is they end up creating conflict. And then from there, you're not going to want to have more of a conversation if you feel like the person's not listening to you, or they're so different from you that they couldn't possibly understand your position. That takes us into number 6, which is to keep an open mind, right? As you converse with new people, you are going to find people who believe things different than you do and have had a different life path and whatever else. The more open that you can be, the more accepting. Now, again, that doesn't necessarily mean you have to say, oh, you married someone 20 years younger than you that was a minor. It doesn't mean you have to agree with something like that, right? But if you can acknowledge and sort of ask questions around the journey, around the story, around what's going on, and keep an open mind, that is more likely to allow you to continue the conversation in a productive way. If you sort of get stuck up on something and you get closed off and you start, knocking the other person down, locking them out of things, then you're very likely to find yourself out of a conversation because things are not going to go well or tensions are going to rise. Now, this can be difficult, right? Because people do things or think things that are different than us. And maybe the example I use hits on a moral level, so that's like really one of the most difficult ones. But I see people being closed-minded about things that are less important on the spectrum, right? Things like, oh, I like a reliable, dependable car. Oh, no, you don't. You want a nice SUV so that you can get around and haul stuff. And it's like, when I hear conversations like that, it's very confusing to me because they're so closed-minded and so focused on being right that they miss out on what the other person actually has to contribute to the conversation. And not only that, but it doesn't, when you stay closed-minded like that, it doesn't really make any progress on the other person, right? If you do something like try to tell them what kind of car they like because you think that they should like it for whatever reason, you're not going to open up that conversation and keep it flowing in a way that will lead to more conversation and a strong relationship. On to number 7. This is similar to validating understanding, but it's finding ways to give compliments or positive sort of intent towards someone else, right? So one of the things that I like to do, for example, is if someone is talking about an activity that I don't know anything about or that I don't enjoy or that I'm not particularly experienced in, I still give them credit, right, for that sort of activity, that thing that they enjoy. So I think dancing is a good example. That's not something I'm particularly drawn to, not something I tend to do very often. If I meet someone and they say like, oh, I'm really big into dance, I go out to do, I don't know, a dance routine or whatever once a month with this group or whatever else, I like to say like, oh, wow, that's really cool. It's not something that I, know a lot about, but it is something that I think is an admirable pursuit, right? So if you can kind of keep your mind open in the sense of being able to find the positive and emphasize the positive of what other people are doing, that's going to help keep the conversation going because it's going to help them feel more comfortable, right? One of the ways that conversation ends or gets awkward is because one or both people are sort of feeling they're not listening to me, they don't respect me, they're not interested in the things I have to say. So by finding ways to sort of give out those compliments in ways that are genuine, right? You don't need to sort of make things up, but finding genuine ways to compliment them, you're going to keep the conversation alive because you're going to help them feel more comfortable. Moving on to number 8, minimize complaints, criticizing, and one-upmanship, right? The less you can do of sort of honing in on negative things, the more likely it is that the conversation is going to be open up nicely. If you are talking to someone and you just sit there and focus on something really, really negative, the other person is not going to want to talk to you for a period of time, right? It quickly becomes sort of heavy. And if it's not someone that you know well, it can definitely be enough to end the conversation, right? I don't know if you've ever had the experience of you sort of, I don't know, doing some chore at the grocery store or waiting for the bus or whatever else, and someone comes up and starts talking to you, and they just, within a couple sentences, start unloading all these problems, all these negative things, right? Oh, I hate how this works. Oh, the bus is late. It's always late. I'm never going to be able to make it to my stuff on time. Oh, the bus system is so bad and blah, 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 whatever, right? If you stay focused on these negative aspects, many people will drop out of the conversation because it's not pleasant to be in, right? Now, that doesn't mean there can't be any negativity ever. It's just you need to focus in on sort of the percentage of the time that you are saying positive, neutral, and negative things, right? If you're talking or focusing in on something negative for a very long time and the other person has shown no interest in that, then it's very likely the conversation is going to end in a way that is faster and doesn't lead to more of a relationship. All right, moving on to number 9, share what excites you, right? One of the easiest ways to keep a conversation going is to have one person or the other or both start sort of speaking and leaning into something that actually excites them, something that they actually care about, right? That's why these sort of surface level small talk conversations can be so painful for many people, is because neither person is talking about something they're actually engaged in. So that's why one of the previous points is to sort of keep an open mind and try to engage with what it is that the other person cares about, because that's where conversation is really going to be able to flow well. If you try to push into sort of these topics that neither person cares about, it's not likely to result in much conversation. Now, in new conversations, you might have to poke around a bit, right? You might have to, oh, maybe we'll try to talk about sports. Oh, you're not really into sports. Okay, maybe we'll try to talk about cars. Maybe we'll try to talk about mental health. Maybe we'll try to talk about, these different themes until you can find something that one or both people are interested in. And when you're able to find that overlap and get past sort of this entry part of the conversation where you're sort of searching for the topics, then you have a very good chance of keeping the conversation going, because one or both people will be able to contribute meaningfully or ask questions in a way that is engaged with their curiosity. Moving on to number 10, which is increase vulnerability. But there's a lot of caveats here, right? You need to do this slowly, and you need to base it on what's going on in the conversation. Being vulnerable does not necessarily mean you have to share secrets or deep things, but you can share more of these things that you find a little bit more guarded, right? So, for example, as an initial conversation with someone that I've been talking to for 2 sentences, I probably wouldn't bring up my history with mental health problems, right? Because it's just not necessarily something that makes sense right at the beginning of a conversation with someone I don't know, unless there's surrounding context that makes make sense. But otherwise, what makes more sense is as you sort of get to know the person, as you're talking, as you're sharing things, showing some more vulnerability, right? So if I've been talking to someone for an hour and it makes sense in the conversation, I might share that with them if it seems like it's going to produce more conversation, or that they've engaged or going to engage with something like that. So by sort of being willing to share some of those things more proactively, you help open up the conversation, right? As you share, or if people share with you, the conversation is more likely to go into these more vulnerable areas, which again touches on these areas that people tend to care more about, and therefore you're more likely to get a longer, deeper, engaging conversation. So this is probably the one that I recommend the most sort of nuance or paying attention to, because it does matter how you do this, but it is one of the ways to get much richer, deeper conversations. On to 11. 11 is look for balance. And by look for balance, I mean make sure there is a good mix between you talking, the other person talking. There's a good balance between positive and negative, right? Like if you just stay in this like, wow, you're amazing, that's the greatest thing ever, space forever, then that's also not going to be a great or engaging conversation. If you're talking the whole time, or they're talking 100% of the time and you don't contribute anything, you just ask questions and the conversation seems to be trailing away, you're just grilling them, that's not going to be a really good formula for a good conversation. If you stick on one topic while it seems like their steam is dying for it, that's not going to be good. So basically, just as you sort of get more skill around conversation, look for sort of balancing out these different aspects so that it keeps sort of this nice natural flow. We all, I think, intuitively kind of feel when a conversation is going well or not going well. Maybe that's less common than I think, but for the most part, kind of tuning based on what's going on will help keep the conversation alive and flowing in a natural way. And 12, the last one, is to just practice, right? If you don't talk to new people often and you don't use these sort of tools or work on these tools often, then they're not going to come naturally to you, right? These are sort of things that as you have conversations, you practice mindfully, you will over time develop them more naturally into your sort of tool belt for having conversations. So one of the best things you can do is to have more conversations with more people that you don't know or only know a little bit. Now, obviously, this can come with its own bucket of challenges like anxiety and, do I really want to talk to someone at the grocery store or whatever else? Those details are kind of beyond the scope of this video. There are definitely different ways that you can do this, but the more you're able to sort of pick, okay, I'm going to work on asking questions about things that people care about for this conversation. The more you can practice these different tools, the more likely it is that they're going to come to you more naturally, and you'll be able to sort of keep the conversation alive and natural. So hopefully that helps give you a few ideas for how to sort of keep a conversation going in a way that feels genuine, right? Not a way that is sort of rooted in this surface level, okay, we're just going to talk about the weather for an hour and a half. All right, on to the reflection questions. 1, how can you make conversation more comfortable for others? 2, what are your intentions when you go into a new conversation? So that's all I've got for this video. Hopefully that helps give you some ideas on different strategies you can use for keeping a conversation going in a way that feels natural without really leveraging a bunch of small talk. As always, if you have any questions, comments, topics you want me to cover, throw them down in the box below. I'll get to them as soon as I can, and I'll see you next time. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please take a second to subscribe, as it really helps out a lot. If you're looking for more content, there's all sorts of information over at howtohappy.com, and if you want something a little bit more condensed and concise, I've also written the book Mindscaping, which is essentially a framework for optimizing happiness. So we'll have the link there as well, and that's all I've got. Thanks again. I'll see you next time.